seeing what's happening to our community, the children, the families. It's heart-wrenching for me.
Grew up in the community, guys. It's such a lovely community. It just breaks your heart.
Stories of survival.
And we sat in that tree for about an hour and a half, 2 hours.
While loved ones wait for any news on those missing.
If they had any way to get to a phone, we'd have heard from them by now.
They would have already called.
They're gone. They're in heaven.
Lawmakers look for answers and solutions.
And that's something that we owe to the people of Texas, to those families who have suffered immensely. We owe that to them.
The way winners talk is not to point fingers. They talk about solutions.
This is a special edition of State of Texas. Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Josh Hinkle. Near the Guadalupe River in Kerr County, deaths reached the triple digits this week after heavy rain caused flash floods across the hill country. As survivors start recovery efforts, state and local emergency responders continue to search for missing people in several counties. In Burnett County, we heard stories of people holding onto trees for hours before help could arrive. And one man found 8 miles from where water swept his vehicle off the road near Marble Falls. In Leander and Jonestown, homes pushed off their foundations and completely destroyed. Boats washed ashore and cars settled next to the trees. But it was further west in Kerr County that saw the highest numbers of lives lost. The small community of Hunt saw raging floodwaters crash into homes as the Guadalupe River surged. In Kerrville, the wall of water swallowed homes, RVs, and overwhelmed a summer camp. More than 24 campers and counselors lost their lives at Camp Mystic, and many more up and down the river. A week after those devastating floods hit the hill country, President Donald Trump took some time to survey the area. Brianna Hollis reports.
Well, the president addressed the heartbreak and the damage. He thanked first responders. He touted the federal aid he supplied, and he also talked about improving the warning system. He and the First Lady met with families in Hunt before coming to the roundtable at the Emergency Operations Center.
It's hard to believe the devastation. Trees that are 100 years old just ripped out of the ground. We just visited with incredible families that, look, they've been devastated. They lost their child or 2 children, and just hard to believe what, I've never seen anything like it.
A visit from the president, often a sign of the greatest of tragedies. That proves true here in Kerr County, where Trump walked through piles of debris in Hunt.
A little narrow river that becomes a monster, and that's what happened.
I think there's a lot of questions. Why weren't people alerted?
Community members aren't just grieving, they're starting to ask why and how.
Still a lot of questions.
We're also taking historic action to ensure that such a nightmare never happens again.
Texas Agriculture Commissioner Sid Miller hoping that comes in the form of a more robust alert system.
Could have saved a lot of lives if we'd had some kind of alert system. And I think the legislature will also act on that too.
And just weeks after the president vowed to overhaul how federal disaster aid works, several federal resources are at play in the flood's aftermath, both in the form of boots on the ground help and emergency declaration funds.
We cannot thank you enough for deploying the Coast Guard, deploying the resources, and as you pointed out, immediately.
Some other notable names at the roundtable: Senator Ted Cruz, Attorney General Ken Paxton, several first responders. Dr. Phil, who's a native Texan, was even there, and he shared a note encouraging people to support those who lost loved ones by consistently checking in and making sure those folks are never forgotten. In Kerrville, I'm Brianna Hollis.
We are just 1 week away from the start of the special session at the state capitol. The governor revealed the agenda, which includes 4 items he wants lawmakers to explore to address the aftermath of the flooding in the hill country. That includes legislation to improve early warning systems and other infrastructure, legislation to strengthen emergency communications and other response infrastructure, relief funding for response to and recovery from the storms, and legislation to evaluate and streamline rules and regulations to speed preparedness and recovery from natural disasters. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick and Speaker Dustin Burrows also announced the creation of select committees on disaster preparedness and flooding. Both House and Senate committees will look through the agenda items the governor outlined this week. The first hearing will take place on the 23rd, just 2 days after the start of the special session. Each committee will have 9 members from both chambers.
We want to make sure that when we end that session, we end it making sure these communities are better, more resilient, and have the resources that they need for the next chapter of their lives.
Amid that legislative conversation, investigator Matt Grant has been following renewed attention on weather systems, including outdoor warning sirens. Thank you for joining us, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
So, do we have an idea of what lawmakers have planned for this special session exactly?
Well, in addition to money for relief efforts, Governor Abbott announced that during the special session, which starts on July 21st, there will be legislation to strengthen emergency communications. That stems from a bill that we first told you about that was filed this past legislative session that did not pass, but it's getting some renewed attention now, in addition to improving early warning systems in flood-prone areas. That's likely to include warning sirens, which Kerr County, where we are right now, did not have.
And as expected, as we talk about some of these solutions, things have gotten a little bit political. Many have pointed to cuts to the National Weather Service as evidence that President Trump had some sort of responsibility for the floods. What have you found?
Well, the White House is strongly pushing back on that. They said that the National Weather Service did its job. We did find that there were 6 vacancies at the Austin San Antonio office, but ultimately, Josh, the warnings did go out, and experts say it's up to local leaders and county officials to act on those warnings. This week, Democratic Congressman Lloyd Doggett sent a letter to the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. He listed 14 pointed questions that he wants answers to. Among those, did the cuts have any impact on the response? If so, how?
We need that information. We need to know the impact of these cutbacks and hiring freezes, not just to find out the results of this disaster, but to prevent other disasters from occurring.
And also he wanted to know about not just the cuts, but the communication between Kerr County officials and about communications, if any, with Camp Mystic officials and what guidance, if anything, was given. So he's looking for more detail about that. The mayor of Kerrville said that the day before the flooding on July 3rd, there was a phone call held by the Texas Division of Emergency Management with county judges and city mayors to talk about the forecast on July 4th. He says he was not invited to that call.
I wasn't invited to the call. Maybe I'm not a local mayor, I can't tell.
We've asked Tatum about that. So far, Josh, we've not heard back.
And I know that there have been a lot of calls for some type of after-action review that's going to happen post all these flood recoveries, and that comes from the federal, state, and local leaders, so we'll have a lot more answers in the coming weeks for sure.
We will.
Thank you very much, Matt. To get better understanding of this historic flood, we have a radar time lapse of the storm. Widespread rain across the area, but it wasn't until here at 1:14 a.m. on July 4th when the National Weather Service issued a flash flood warning saying that it is life-threatening. At 3:35, the warning is extended. The U.S. Geological Survey gauge along the Guadalupe River showed the river reached already 6 feet above flood stage. At 4:03 a.m., a flash flood emergency was issued, indicating a more dire threat with rescues underway. And at 4:35, the river gauge temporarily stopped sending data. Before going offline, water reached 29.5 feet, more than 19 feet above flood stage. Close to 5 a.m., the river crested over 37.5 feet, more than 27 feet above flood stage. At 5:30 a.m., the Weather Service sends an update to the flash flood emergency saying rain gauges indicate a large and deadly flood wave moving down the river. A gauge in Kerrville showed the Guadalupe has peaked at 34.29 feet, 25 feet above flood stage, the 3rd highest level ever in that location. New rounds of storms would continue to drop in the area, making it harder for crews saving lives. In all, almost a foot of rain fell. For perspective on the intensity of the flood in Kerr County, take a look at these before and after satellite images. The view from above shows the Guadalupe River banks full of green trees between a bridge and a dam. The aftermath shows how the water either flattened or swept the trees downstream. Images from MaxAR Technologies also show before and after from other locations in Kerrville and along the river.
Thinking that there's a family suffering behind each of those pictures, really brings home the feeling of honoring the people that were lost.
A week of heartbreak in Central Texas and the pain that lingers for those left behind. Coming up, the names, the faces, and the heroic final acts behind the tragedy.